Seattle, Washington, the 1st of September, 1957, 7:30 p.m. The late summer sun casts long shadows across the modest frame houses of Seattle's Central District as 4-year-old Jimi Hendrix walks purposefully down 23rd Avenue, a worn notebook clutched against his chest and a stubby pencil tucked behind his ear. Tonight is the night he's been dreaming about for weeks. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll himself, is performing at Sick's Stadium, just a few miles away. But there's one problem that stands between Jimi and his hero: money. The cheapest ticket costs $1.50, and Jimi Hendrix doesn't have $1.50. In fact, he doesn't have 50 cents, or even 15 cents. But Jimi Hendrix has something more valuable than money tonight. He has determination, creativity, and the kind of desperate hunger that can move mountains, or at least get a poor black kid from the Central District to see the most famous white performer in America. This is creative storytelling, inspired by the documented true story of how a teenage Jimi Hendrix watched Elvis Presley from Tightwad Hill on the 1st of September 1957, a moment that would change the course of guitar history forever. As Jimi walks toward the stadium, he passes through a Seattle that's still rigidly segregated in all the ways that matter. The Central District, where Jimi lives with his father Al and his grandmother, is one of the few areas where black families can find housing. Downtown venues like the Paramount Theater don't welcome black patrons. And most white establishments have unspoken but understood policies about who belongs and who doesn't. Elvis Presley represents something complicated for young Jimi Hendrix. On one hand, Elvis is performing music that was created by black artists: rhythm and blues, gospel, country blues, the sounds that Jimi grew up hearing in his own community. On the other hand, Elvis has become the acceptable face of this music for white audiences, the performer who made it safe for mainstream America to embrace what had previously been dismissed as race music. But at 14 years old, Jimi isn't thinking about cultural appropriation or racial politics. He's thinking about the way Elvis moves, the way he holds a guitar, the way his voice can be tender one moment and raw the next. Jimi has been listening to Elvis records on the radio and dreaming of seeing him perform live. But a live Elvis concert might as well be on the moon for a kid from Jimi's circumstances. As he approaches the stadium district, Jimi can hear the distant sound of the crowd growing louder. Cars are parked for blocks around Sick's Stadium, and well-dressed white families hurry past him toward the main entrances, clutching their tickets and talking excitedly about finally seeing Elvis in person. Jimi feels a stab of envy as he watches these families, not because they're white, but because they have what he doesn't: the price of admission to see greatness in person. But Jimi has learned early in his life that when you can't have something the normal way, you find another way. And that's when he remembers Tightwad Hill. Every Seattle kid knows about Tightwad Hill, the grassy slope that sits just beyond the left field fence of Sick's Stadium. From the hill, you can see into the stadium during baseball games, and enterprising fans have been watching Seattle Rainiers games for free from this vantage point for years. The stadium management tolerates it because there's not much they can do about it. They can't charge admission for a public hill. But tonight, Tightwad Hill is about to become something more than just a place to catch free baseball. Tonight, it's going to become the launching pad for one of the greatest guitar careers in history. As Jimi climbs the hill, he sees that he's not the only one with this idea. About 24 other fans have gathered on the slope, most of them teenagers and young adults who couldn't afford tickets. Some have brought blankets and picnic baskets, turning their economic exclusion into an impromptu party. The crowd on the hill is notably different from the crowd inside the stadium. It's more racially diverse, younger, and hungrier, literally and figuratively. These are the fans who love the music so much they're willing to watch from half a mile away just to catch a glimpse of their hero. Jimi finds a spot near the top of the hill where he has a clear sightline to the stadium. Stage. It's not perfect. The stage is a distant rectangle of light, and Elvis will appear as little more than a moving figure, but it's enough. It has to be enough. As darkness falls and the stadium lights come up, Jimi can feel the electricity in the air. Even from this distance, the energy of 16,200 excited fans is palpable. A low rumble of anticipation that seems to make the very ground vibrate. Then, at 8:30 p.m. sharp, the moment arrives. Even from Tightwad Hill, Jimi can hear the roar when Elvis takes the stage. He opens his notebook and prepares to write, determined to document every moment of this experience, since he can't afford to live it up close. What happens next will be remembered by Jimi for the rest of his life. Through sheer force of will and concentration, he begins to follow Elvis's performance from a distance, writing down every song he can identify, every moment he can capture. The first song is "That's All Right," and even from half a mile away, Jimi can feel the power of Elvis's voice carrying across the September night. He scribbles in his notebook, "That's all right," starts with guitar. As the show continues, Jimi finds himself in a state of total absorption. He's not just watching a concert, he's studying it, analyzing it, trying to understand the magic that makes Elvis so compelling. From his distant vantage point, he focuses on the things he can see: Elvis's movements, his relationship with the guitar, the way he commands the stage, even from so far away. Heartbreak, Hotel. Jimi writes, "Don't be cruel, love me tender." Each song title in his notebook represents not just a musical performance, but a moment of connection across an impossible distance. Jimi is experiencing something that many fans never get: the pure essence of Elvis's artistry, stripped of the hysteria and commercialism that surrounds it up close. From Tightwad Hill, Elvis becomes something almost mythical. He's not just a performer, he's a force of nature, a figure who can command attention and devotion from half a mile away. This distance, which should diminish Elvis's impact, somehow amplifies it for young Jimi Hendrix. As the concert progresses, something profound is happening in Jimi's mind. Watching Elvis from this distance, he begins to understand that the real power of a great performer isn't in the details that you can only see up close. It's in the ability to project personality and emotion across any distance, to make even the people in the cheap seats or on the free hill feel like they're part of something special. During Hound Dog, Jimi notices something that will stay with him forever. Even from half a mile away, he can see that Elvis doesn't just play the guitar, he inhabits it. The instrument becomes an extension of his body, his voice, his very being. For a young man who has been fascinated by guitars but never owned one, this is a revelation. Jimi writes in his notebook, "Guitar is part of him. This observation will prove prophetic." Years later, when Jimi develops his own legendary relationship with the guitar, critics will describe his playing in exactly the same terms, as if the instrument is not something he plays, but something he becomes. The concert continues with "Love Me Tender," and Jimi notices how Elvis can shift from rock and roll energy to tender vulnerability within the same song. From his position on the hill, Jimi is getting a masterclass in dynamic range, emotional versatility, and the power of authentic expression. But perhaps the most important thing happening on Tightwad Hill isn't what Jimi is seeing, it's what he's feeling. For the first time in his young life, he's experiencing the kind of overwhelming artistic inspiration that will drive the rest of his career. This isn't just entertainment for him, it's a calling. As Elvis launches into Jailhouse Rock, Jimi realizes that he doesn't just want to watch greatness, he wants to create it. The distance between himself and Elvis, which started the evening as a source of frustration, has become a source of motivation. If Elvis can affect him this powerfully from half a mile away, what might be possible if Jimi could develop that same kind of magnetic force? The notebook fills with song titles and observations, Blue suede shoes, crowd goes crazy. Ready Teddy, guitar solo, rip it up, dancing. Each notation represents more than just a concert review. It's the foundation of a musical education that Jimi is giving himself through pure observation and dedication. He's learning how a great performer structures a show, builds energy, connects with an audience, and uses music as a vehicle for something larger than entertainment. When Elvis performs Peace in the Valley, Jimi notices how the entire stadium becomes quiet and reverent. Even from Tightwad Hill, he can sense the shift in the audience's energy, the way a spiritual song can transform a crowd of screaming teenagers into something approaching a congregation. Jimi writes, "Gospel, different feeling." This observation will prove crucial to Jimi's later development as an artist. He's learning that great performers don't just entertain, they take audiences on emotional journeys. And they know how to use different types of material to create different kinds of connections. As the concert moves toward its conclusion, Jimi realizes that this experience has changed him fundamentally. He came to Tightwad Hill as a fan, hoping to catch a glimpse of his idol. He's leaving as an aspiring artist who has received a masterclass in the power of musical performance. The final song is "Don't Be Cruel," and, as Elvis's voice echoes across the Seattle night, one last time, Jimi makes a decision that will change the course of music history. He decides that he must, somehow, learn to play guitar, not because he wants to imitate Elvis, although Elvis will remain an influence throughout his career, but because he wants to discover his own version of the magic he witnessed tonight. He wants to find his own way to project power and emotion across impossible distances, to touch people he's never met through the universal language of music. As the stadium lights dim and the crowd begins to file out, Jimi remains on the hill for a few extra minutes, looking at his notebook full of song titles and observations. This notebook will become one of his most treasured possessions, a tangible connection to the night that changed everything. 2 months later, Jimi will create a drawing of Elvis based on his memories of this concert. The drawing will show Elvis with his guitar, captured from the perspective of someone who saw him as larger than life, which, from half a mile away, on a grassy hill, he truly was. But the most important artifact from this night isn't the notebook or the drawing. It's the inspiration that begins burning in Jimi's soul as he walks home through the Seattle night. For the first time in his life, he has a clear vision of what he wants to become. Not necessarily famous, not necessarily rich, but powerful in the way that great artists are powerful, able to move people, to change them, to create moments of transcendence that can reach across any distance. The cruel irony of this story is that Jimi Hendrix will go on to revolutionize guitar playing in ways that Elvis never could, creating sounds and techniques that will influence generations of musicians. But Elvis will die in 1977, when Jimi is at the height of his powers, and the two greatest performers of their era will never meet. Instead, their connection will remain frozen in this moment. The 1st of September 1957, when a poor black kid watched the king of rock and roll from a free hill and decided that he, too, would find a way to touch the world through music. Years later, when Jimi performs songs like Purple Haze and the Star-Spangled Banner, when he revolutionizes the electric guitar and changes the sound of rock forever, he will carry with him the lessons he learned on Tightwad Hill, that the greatest art comes not from privilege or access, but from hunger and determination, that distance can amplify rather than diminish inspiration, and that sometimes the most profound artistic connections happen not when artist meets artist, but when a true fan experiences art so powerfully that they're transformed by it. The hill where Jimi Hendrix watched Elvis Presley is gone now, paved over for development decades ago. But the inspiration that was born there continues to reverberate through every electric guitar that screams, every performer who pushes boundaries, every artist who refuses to let economic or social barriers keep them from their dreams. This story is creative storytelling based on the documented fact that Jimi Hendrix watched Elvis Presley perform from Tightwad Hill on the 1st of September 1957. While the specific thoughts and observations described here are dramatized, they're based on the known impact this experience had on Jimmy's decision to pursue music. The notebook that Jimmy kept during the concert and the drawing he made afterward are real artifacts that have been displayed in museums and documented by music historians. They represent tangible proof of how a single evening can change the trajectory of an entire life and, ultimately, the course of musical history. The real tragedy of this story isn't that Jimmy couldn't afford a ticket. It's that by the time he could afford any ticket to any concert, anywhere in the world, Elvis was gone. But perhaps that's fitting. Their connection was always meant to be about inspiration, across distance, about the power of art to transcend the barriers that separate us, about the way great music can reach anyone who's willing to climb a hill and listen with their whole heart. If this story has inspired you to think about how limitation can become creativity, how distance can amplify connection, or how the greatest artistic influences sometimes come from the most unexpected places, I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because next week we're exploring another moment when economic barriers couldn't stop true artistic destiny. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been inspired by something you experienced from a distance? Do you believe that hunger and longing create better art than easy access and privilege? Share this video with someone who understands that the greatest achievements often begin with the smallest moments of inspiration, and that sometimes the most profound meetings happen between people who never actually meet. Because here's the truth, this story teaches us, you don't need money to witness greatness. You don't need access to be inspired, and you don't need permission to transform your life through the power of what moves you. The music is bigger than any of us, but the inspiration to create music, that can happen anywhere, anytime, to anyone willing to climb a hill and dream. Thank you for joining me on this journey to a grassy hill in Seattle, where guitar history began. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll continue exploring the human moments behind legendary music. Remember, the greatest artists aren't made by privilege, they're made by the fire that burns in people who want it badly enough to watch from half a mile away. Thanks for watching.